Morning, everybody. It's Christopher Nicholson with Canada West, and Dawn and Cynthia are in the controls. And a big good morning to you, and thanks for joining. Got a great topic today. First, want to thank our partners, Driving Force and Cal Tire, and actually just having come back from Mission Ridge, a special thank you to Driving Force and Cal Tire. Lots of snow in Rogers Pass, and beautiful sunrise over in the on the prairies. Wanted to also recognize and thank a couple of partners on this one. As you've heard from the previous session, we have partnered with the British Columbia Hotels Association, as well as Go2HR. So I want to thank them, and I'll turn it over to them in a second. And also just recognize this session topic, virtual training, actually came up from one of our member sessions from our members, and Go2 immediately just jumped on it and developed the content. And it's a great illustration of how the value that Go2 brings to our industry. So to Andrea and to the Go2 team, thank you so much. One quick update we did want to share, particularly with this group, an update to the winter operations considerations document has just been posted in the member section. And a special note, Appendix 7, this is on HR section update, and special thanks to Chair Helen Davies and the Canada West HR Committee for that content. So that's posted with the updates. With that, I would like to pass it on to our colleagues. I don't think Ingrid Jarrett is on the call, but I would like to pass it over to our Hotel Association colleague, Mike McLeod, and we'll pass it over to you. Take it from there.
Great, thanks, Christopher, and good morning, everybody. I'm Mike McLeod, Director of Member and Business Development for the BC Hotel Association. It's our great pleasure to work with Canada West and Go2HR on this short series. This is week 2 of 3 sessions that we're partnering on. Our next and final session will be next Wednesday, November 4th, focusing on accommodations, public spaces, and housekeeping areas. So please stay tuned for the registration for that. BC Hotel Association has a lot of great resources on our website, bcha.com. If you'd like to learn more about what's going on the accommodation side of things, as well as member benefits. And with that, I would like to introduce our host, our speaker today, Andrea Hink. Andrea is the Director of Industry Training for Go2HR. Andrea, over to you, and we'll talk to you after. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christopher, and thanks so much, Mike, for the introduction. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be here today and join all these wonderful partners here on our call this morning and talking about virtual employee training. So for those of you who are not familiar with Go2HR, we are the Human Resources and Health and Safety Association for the tourism industry in BC. So we support employers with resources, information, strategic planning in the areas of recruitment, retention, training, and health and safety. We run an industry-specific job board, so you're already either completed or still in full recruitment mode. So you can take advantage of our job board at Go2HR to actually post your job vacancies, not just at the beginning of the season, but throughout the whole winter. And we run a number of training programs, some of them being the Superhost and customer service training program and Food Safe. So, well, why don't we dive right in here and quick overlook on our topics for today. Obviously, our business has been impacted quite a bit over the last 7 months. Business operations, health and safety guidelines, COVID guidelines, and that has obviously as well extended to how we recruit staff and now how we're gonna do. How we're going to train staff specifically. With those of you who have large number of employees to onboard, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 weeks left before, if the weather continues as it is, before the hills open. So you're probably on crunch time right now to get going. So today we want to talk a little bit about planning your training session for online, how you transition content, and just a few ideas around employee engagements and infrastructure. And Dawn and we talked with the team yesterday. your questions can be put in the chat, and we're probably gonna hold them off till the end of kind of our slide presentation here. So, but feel free to already populate them in the chat as they come up for you, so we don't kind of want to lose track on that, obviously, and wait till the very end. But that's we have Dawn and Carissa who are monitoring that in the back end, and Cynthia as well, I think. So yeah, so that's where we're gonna go with that today. And I want to make sure we leave enough space as well and room at the end and opportunities to have a bit of a discussion. Maybe some people of you want to already share some experiences from their online training, or just general questions which come up. Okay. What I would like to do, I would like to start with a quick survey question here. And Carissa, if you would be so kind to launch the poll for me. I would love to know what is your experience in delivering training online? You maybe have never done it, you've always been focused very much on face-to-face, you have delivered a few sessions, or hey, you say, I'm a pro, and then if you are, you could maybe share some of your experiences with the group here today. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds here. And Carissa, I think we can share the results here. And as we can see, half of you on the call here today have never done it, and some of you have. So it's like a 55 to 38, and very few people have done it regularly. So the ones who do, you might have some insights to share later on as well. So that's great. So I think we can end the poll right here, but that gives me a really good idea of where our conversation can go today. Right, what we would like to talk about today is a kind of different steps in regards to planning training. So planning your training, what you need to consider in regards to your logistics, what to consider before you start the training, even get people together online during the session. And then a lot of questions came up ahead, actually, which is great to got some questions from you when you registered on what about engagement of learners, you know, face-to-face, different obviously than the online. So we would like to talk a little bit about that today as well. Okay, so when we talk about planning your training, you want to consider a couple of things: the logistics, the format you're going to be looking at for your training, and as well as your content. So when we're looking at the logistics, you probably already have planned out your training schedule. And one thing to consider is that if you, for example, for your onboarding, you do 3 days, 3 full days on the hill, that is not necessarily equally 3 days in an online environment. So you definitely need to kind of allow yourself more time to schedule your online sessions. And it's going to be a lot more challenging as well to get the group dynamic like you do in a classroom where everybody's super excited, they get together, they chat amongst each other, and it's really fun. And now how you'll be able to move this over into a virtual environment is a little bit more challenging. So you want to look at how many sessions would you need to deliver, and you want to look at, okay, how many sessions and how many people per sessions. The bigger your group is going to get, the more challenging it will be to make it a very interactive session and not defaulting into a lecturing kind of style where you just dump information at people. So that's going to be one of the challenges I've been kind of facing when we transitioned a lot of our training to virtual sessions on how to make that switch. And when you're looking at your sessions, you might, on the hill, you might say, hey, we're doing a full day, 9 to 4, we're having a lunch break, a couple of coffee breaks, and we're good to go. When you go into an online environment, you probably don't want to do more than 2 hours at a time and then give it a break and then do another 2 hours maybe in the afternoon. I just joined, I completed a course at SFU, and that was at 3 days. And they had 2.5 hours in the morning, which had a quick coffee break in between. And then we had a 2-hour lunch break, and then we had another 2.5 hours in the afternoon. And that was great. Everybody was engaged, you know, the attention was there for the content, the conversations were really good. The only thing we had was we had 2 days back to back. And that's really challenging if you have a full day online, and even it's only 4 or 5 hours, and then the same day right away the next morning. There isn't a lot of time to actually kind of decompress or kind of reinforce learning and give time for your learners to kind of work on the retention of all the content, right? Or maybe go through notes or get some homework going for the next session. So if you can, ideally, your schedule should kind of allow for a little bit of time. You might have a morning session one day and then a morning session the next day, or like have a half day in between where there's a bit of room. So that's quite important, I think. And then do all your staff members have access to internet? I mean, it sounds pretty basic, but there are a lot of areas, specifically looking at BC or other countries, or if they like come from the States or other provinces, they might not have access to internet. So if you're kind of hosting a virtual session, you need to make sure that they have the tools. I mean, they could call in, but that's kind of not the same, right? Sitting on a phone line for the next 2-3 hours and not be able to virtually engage. So access to technology is key here. And then you want to look at the format of training. How are you actually going to create your sessions? Are you going to share some of it ahead of time, or you provide them access to like a training portal where they be able to access information? Or you say, hey, you know, we want them to do a certain selection of online courses ahead of time or part of their onboarding and training. So self-directed as in they choose the time when they want to learn, and you just tell them, okay, this is when it should be done and completed, but then they're self-paced and self-directed. Or you go with a live session, and like what you would do in the classroom, you do a live delivery, and now you're going to do this virtually, and it's instructor, trainer-led. So it's a live session where you say, you know, we want attendees to be there at a specific time and log in at a specific platform, and everybody's going to be there at the same place. And you could do blended learning. You could do both. You could share some of your information where you say, okay, you know, health and safety policies and guidelines, stuff they have to read, you know, employee handbooks and everything. We do a lot of self-directed stuff on that, but and then in preparation to leading into a live session. So that definitely works as well. If it comes to content, look at what content you want to share. And then there you're probably going to be looking at, okay, what did I do last season in regards to training material, right? So, and now how can I transition this online? Being at your guidelines, you know, any customer service training you want to do, any scenarios you want to practice. One of the questions came up, is there any training which doesn't lend itself to a virtual online environment? And tricky question, because you can probably teach everything virtually, but how effective is this going to be, right? You can talk about steps of rescuing a skier on an accident off the mountain and talk about the process, but it's not the same as doing it hands-on and getting them skiing down the hill actually in real time. So there are certain things which work out really well online and others not so much. I did a facilitations training course a while back, and that was all online, and there wasn't a lot of time to practice, you know, practice scenarios, you know, handling, kind of practicing difficult interactions with customers. How are you going to do that? I'm doing a bit of role play and all that. It's possible in a virtual environment, but it's not quite as fluent. So you need to have a look at what works for you, what you want to share online and what doesn't. And then what kind of format you're going to share this with as well. So you want to really create a lesson plan. There's a lot of planning going into preparing for virtual session. You're not as easily able to wing it like you're in a classroom where you just kind of move around a bit, you change some of your teaching methods on the whim, you're a lot more flexible, you have the group, you can make a few jokes and off you go, right? Or everything goes wrong, you say, hey, why don't we do a coffee break here? Virtual session is a little bit more tricky and you have to really plan it. So what I do when I do a training session, I create a lesson plan. I talk about, okay, this is the topic I want to teach. This is the activity I'm going to do. And this is how long it's going to take me. This is when I'm going to take a break. This is what we're going to do after the break. So I have it all really, really kind of laid out and know where I want to go with this. Because depending on the size of the group you have online, you want to keep an eye on the dynamics in the course that everybody is going to be involved in your conversation. So everything you can do logistically ahead of time, you kind of want to get that out of the way and be really confident. let's talk a little bit about the whole infrastructure around actually hosting a session. So we talked about, planning your content and really know what format you want to go for, the group sizes you might have in a live session, what works for you best. And there isn't really a goal number. I mean, I've been in training sessions with 30 people. I've been in training sessions with 12 or 8. It all works. It really depends on the degree of involvement and how much time you have as well, right? So when it comes to sharing content, you can obviously send like pre-starting date on the hill. You can send out information to your staff, your new hires, or your recurring coming back for the season staff members. You can send it to them by email, like PDF files, video links. A lot of sharing is available. You can send it directly to email. Or you can put it in a chat while you're in a live function and ask them to download specific documents or videos you want to have them to look at the live session. Or another option is you can have a learning management system, which is a digital platform basically to host training courses. And from there, you can create the content and be able then to track training records. You can track attendance. You can see the completion of certain course elements you want them to do. So that's kind of what a learning management system is doing for you. It's basically a digital platform which hosts all your training content. And we've been we're using the learning management system quite a bit within our Superhost training. And as well, we've been hosting a training course for actually the visitor center network here in BC. So we've done this for Destination BC, where they have all the training, their own training, and some of our courses all in one course package, which is then accessible for their employees. So now all they have to do is send out a registration link. They can track attendee attendance, they can do reporting, training records, and all that kind of stuff, and it's all in one place. That's not always, and I will talk about it a bit later, but that's not always available for everybody, of course. Specifically looking at, we have a pretty short lead time in regards to getting ready for the season. The advantage definitely is that if you have a digital training platform, it's a lot less administrative time. You're not running around trying to get sign-in sheets signed off on and Excel spreadsheets flying around everywhere and trying to keep track and who's done what and who's missing a session and then all that kind of stuff. And you have all your tools in place. And as well, you don't have to worry about file sizes. If you want to share anything with your staff ahead on time, that's all available on the digital platform, and you can customize it. It's easily accessible. Again, it's cloud-based, and as I mentioned, you can track any training completion, and you can do anything on the reporting, which is great for HR staff. They want to know the things they add in regards to training and compliance, right? So that's kind of what a learning management system does for you, and that's and there are lots of different learning management systems out there. Really depends on where you're at with your resources and your budget. Let's talk a little bit more about the live session. If you do a virtual training session, there are a number of apps out there, from Google Hangout and Google Meet and Skype and MS Teams and Zoom and GoToWebinars and you name it. I mean, that has been such a development, specifically, obviously, since the beginning of the year. And every provider has really worked on increasing their functionality and really providing lots of tools for instructors online. So there is quite a lot out there. And they all have different packages, like plans and pricing. It depends on how many users, how many registrants per platform, if you're gonna do a monthly, month-to-month payment, if you pay a year ahead. So I don't want to spend our time here on kind of walking you through all the planning and pricing stuff, because it really depends on your organization. And we can always have an offline conversation on that as well, obviously. But a couple to mention here, Zoom is obviously used quite a lot. We're on a Zoom call right now. So I use it a lot for training as well. And Zoom is great as it is has a lot of interactive tools. It has breakout rooms, which I love for group work. And so you can basically whisk people off into separate discussions, being it 2 people or 3 or 6, whatever you want to do, and then have them after like a certain time frame, have them coming back to the main session. What is a little bit more tricky with Zoom, you can't track You can record the session, but you can't necessarily track and report out who's been on the call. With GoToWebinars, you can do that. You can deliver, there's a video function, and you can deliver your content, you have audio and everything, and then you can print out an attendee report right after. And then the recording of that is stored. The one thing you don't have with GoToWebinars is that you don't have the breakout rooms. And I talk about breakout rooms a bit more. So it has a little bit more limited functionality. So it's really worth spending a little bit of time and maybe talking to some people who are doing a lot of online training to see what platforms they're using. There's definitely a ton out there. But I would say at the moment, Zoom is probably the lead on being the provider. And they're doing it, not that I'm a sales rep on Zoom, but they're doing a really good job on putting tutorials on their website and walking your way through it if you have never done this before and explaining functionality and all that kind of stuff. But then there are lots of other apps out as well. So it's definitely worth kind of looking into that. So now we're at this point where you know how many hours you're going to train. You have figured out your schedule. You said, okay, I've got my sessions all figured out. I know who's attending. I have figured out how I'm going to share my content, and I'm good to go. So here are a few more tips around making your training successful. What I would definitely recommend, once you set up, do a test run on your session. I do a ton of that, and then still in the live session, things can happen and it's not expected, right? But at least you have the confidence on kind of trying to deal with that. So I do a test run every single time I run a training session to test technology. Is the flow of my PowerPoint presentation the way it's supposed to be? Do I know all my tools within the platform so I have easy access? So a test run, super important. You want to make sure you have really relevant content. It's not the same like you take all your training content from your classroom and whatever you might have on a PowerPoint deck and just dump it into your virtual and do the same like you would do in a classroom. That's not going to work. Because there is just a different engagement, that just the environment on the online is just totally different. You want to make sure that you send invitations out well ahead on time so your staff is actually available when you want them to be available. And set up reminders. Zoom is doing a good job on that. You do 3 days out, even the morning of, hey, we're looking forward to having you coming on our training session. It starts in 2 hours. Get them ready and kind of really be prepared for this. So it's kind of a few logistics before you actually press the record and online button. During the training, what I like to start off with is the welcome and get everybody on board, get them signed in, get them admitted from the waiting room, and then kind of walk over some of the basic functions of your platform. How to put a chat, how you to use the chat function, how to put a question in, how to raise your hand, how to unmute yourself, how to mute yourself, because you want to make sure you don't have all these background noises going on of people's houses, and how to switch your video on or not. So all kind of is a basic run through the functions, because even though we've been dealing with a lot of online and virtual environments over the last 7 months, not everybody has maybe used it to the extent that they're super confident. And like you would do in the classroom, we talk about agenda and breaks and ground rules. You want to set expectations. What are you looking for as in engagement and kind of a code of conduct throughout your virtual sessions? Like when is it how to speak up? You just open your mic and speak, or do you raise your hand? Being available, being on video or not. That's actually quite a thing. And a lot of sessions I've been to, there's been quite a mix where there's like 20 people who have no video function, so the instructor really speaks to kind of a black screen, and others where you have everybody being on video, and that's definitely a lot more engaging. But that's something you want to decide and really set the ground rules around your virtual sessions. Being there on time, being in a place where people can see you well, where you're not distracted, all that kind of stuff. And throughout the training, it's a little bit different as well than it is in a classroom. You need to do a lot more to keep your audience engaged. There's a lot of screening fatigue on over the last few months, where people are spending a lot of time in front of the screens, being it socially or for work or other reasons or studying. So keeping students engaged or your learners engaged online that's definitely a little bit more challenging. So when we talk about a couple of tips around that, how to make that happen. And one thing, if you have the luxury, have a moderator helping you with the session. Like today, I've got in the background, I've got Carissa and Cynthia and Dawn, and I know I don't have to worry about anything at all in regards to technology, launching polls, anything else which happens, monitoring the chat function, or even if anybody might have come on, one of your staff members, and they have technology issues, and you can't resolve that at the same time while you try to get your course on the go. So having a moderator to help you going through the training session and being your technical expert in the background, super helpful. So when we talk about engagement, it really depends a little bit on the crowd and on the topic, right? So we talked about the lengths of the sessions. So how do you be able to structure that there is enough break time in between? And even if it's a quick 5-minute or 10-minute micro break within a 2 or 3 hour block, super helpful. People can get up, they stretch, they get a coffee, come back and be fully focused. You want to switch up your activities quite a lot. So right now, I'm talking all the time. So for you, there isn't a lot of opportunity right now to engage with me on the content. And this, at the end, we do an open discussion in a Q&A. That is okay for this format, but if you have a group of employees on board, but you really want to do a great dynamic training session, you want to set the tone for your culture of your organization, you want to get them excited about coming on the hill, you need to do more than that. So a lecturing style works to a certain degree, but you really want to make sure that you switch up your activities. You want to show a video. That's maybe a great thing to start. Have a video of your resort and get people really excited about what's to come. You want to move them into breakout session and have a discussion. You throw out a question and say, okay, I want you to collaborate on this question for the next 5 to 6 or 7 minutes. Or you can then go into around the table and ask everybody for input. There are loads of different ways to kind of switch it up, like you would do in the classroom, but you do it a lot more frequently in an online environment because people are just more stationary and focused, and you really want to keep their attention span. And I mentioned breakout rooms. So breakout rooms is when you break out people into groups aside from the main session. So you can distribute them as per how many rooms you want and how many people per room. Press a button and they get whizzed off into their own little environment. And then they can have a conversation, a peer-to-peer assignment you might want them to do, or you might even throw out a quiz and say, hey, you know what? I want you to work on this together in pairs, work on this quiz. We really want to kind of test the knowledge. Breakout rooms are like the best thing ever. And you can do so many different things with it. And then you give them a time. You can actually pop into a breakout room and join the session, pop out again, move into the next. So it's pretty cool. And then you give them a certain set of time. And once the time is up, they get maybe a minute notification. And then automatically they get whizzed back into your main session. And then you have everybody back together in the classroom where you can debrief or continue with your next activity. And that takes a little bit of practice to do that as well. So it's worth definitely, if you're considering that, to practice that with a few people, get a bunch of friends on, say, hey, we're doing a quick happy hour virtually, and I want to test a few functions, test the breakout room, test a few different platforms, and I'm sure they're going to be happy to help you on that. And then and that's where really people kind of stay engaged because they're interested in what's happening. There's always a switch in tempo. There's always a conversation, because in the classroom, you have people, they just have to turn their head and then they're talking to the person next to them or across the table, and they talk to each other over lunch and over a coffee break. You don't have all that when you're in an online environment. So you kind of have to make up for the group dynamics, right? How you can get the high energy going while you still share all the really essential content you want them to know about. So definitely a good thing. And you could open up with the poll question as well, or in between. Throw out the poll on the screen. You can do a Mentimeter. You can do lots of different ways lots of different apps you can engage people. When we do kind of in the classroom and you use a lot of flip charts and maybe sticky notes and you get people's feedback, there's actually a really cool tool which I just learned about not that long ago, and it's called the Jamboard. Let me show this to you here. This is, I just did a screenshot. That's one of my courses I attended recently. Oops. And this is a Google Jamboard. So it's basically a visual flip chart where you can put post-it notes in with your comments, like you have a question and you want people to work on something. So ours was when things are not going well in a group, it's all about facilitation, someone decides to step in. What really works on tactics? And then people, either in a group or individually, write the little post-it notes, and in real lifetime, it kind of gets populated on that screen. And then you can drag them around and everything. It's really fun, really engages the learners. They can see what other people have to say. It gives them good opportunity for people who are not speaking up as much to actually contribute and share what they have to say. So something to remember, and I really liked it. So I haven't played around with it that much yet, but it's a pretty cool tool. And one thing as well you want to look out for is, you know, to engage people who are a little bit on the quieter side. It's easier in the classroom. It's a little bit more difficult virtually, where, you know, people kind of fly on the radar. Not everybody is comfortable being online and kind of speaking up all the time. So the more group activities you do in smaller pairs, or like kind of an activity like this with the Jamboard, for example, or Zoom has the whiteboard function, you as well get contribution from the people who are a little bit quieter. Because we know, we've all been there, right? So you're like in the classroom and there's obviously one or two people who have their hands up all the time and they talk all the time, so, and take over the conversation. So virtually, you even have to keep more an eye on it, how you can keep the people included who are a little bit on the quieter side. I hope the tempo is okay here, that I'm not kind of zipping through things too fast. So if that's the case, just let me know. So a couple of challenges I want to talk about. What's the difference between the virtual towards the in-classroom? And virtually, what we all see now, like now, you see my PowerPoint and then see me in this little window here. And that's all you get to see visually. So, you know, when we're online, we're missing out a lot on the non-verbal cues, the visual cues, you know, body posture and body language, and, you know, is somebody engaged or not so much? Are they interested or not really interested? They don't want to be there, they're uncomfortable. You don't all figure this out because you only have this little screen. I can be nervously tapping my foot under the table right now because I'm really nervous talking to you. You wouldn't see that because you only have this little screen. So you have to kind of be aware of that, and having open communication channels and really kind of addressing your students, acknowledging their feedback, acknowledging their questions they might put in the chat. That's really important because you want to make sure that they're engaged and that they participate, right? And then you have obviously always a few people who are distracted. It takes a lot of self-discipline to be on these calls because you're sitting there by yourself in front of the screen. You might be in a house where you're sharing with 5 other roommates and they're all at home and doing their own thing. So it's loud and, you know, you might get distracted or whatever else is going on. And you might think, hey, I can watch Netflix on the side while I'm listening. All this kind of stuff is going on. So really, through your engagement tactics, make sure that you keep your learners on point. And then everybody learns differently. So when you're in a classroom and you suddenly feel people don't get what you're kind of talking about, or, you know, energy levels are dropping, you can sense this. And then you can quickly whip out a different activity. You might say, hey, you know what? I need to explain this topic a little bit more. Why don't I just whip out my drawing markers and go on the flip chart and kind of explain it that way. So that's a little bit more tricky virtually because you don't always recognize right away what works for one learner and what doesn't for the other. So hence switching it up with different activities gives an opportunity for everybody to learn a lot. So that's I think something you want to look at. And you know, we talked about the planning part, and that's something you want to plan in as well. Like if something doesn't go quite as well as an activity, do you have a bit of a backup plan? Right? A couple of other points I want us to consider here is we talked about timelines and your training schedule. And I know for this season, it's quite a fast turnaround, if you need to get anything going and organized in regards to online training. So there's a lot of pressure on you right now. You want to have a look at, okay, what's my budget actually? Can I do something more extensive, which is more of a longer term investment? Like, hey, training platform sounds great. Have somebody else hosting all my training stuff and I don't have to worry about anything. How are you gonna get people to share signed documents? You want people to sign off on your employee handbook, on the policies. You want them to sign off on your health and safety guidelines, respect at the workplace, any other operational procedures you want them to sign off on. You need to kind of share that with them. And there are actually quite a number of apps out there where you can send out documents and then get your staff members to sign them electronically and send them back to you. There's DocuSign is one of them, which is quite popular. And there's another one, like an Adobe PDF kind of launcher where you can put that in and sign it electronically and then send it back right away. So make it as easy as possible for your staff to actually get through the onboarding process and get you everything you need before the first day on the Hill, right? And another thing to consider is, and the question came up, and that's a really interesting one actually, compensation for training. So you say, okay, we are opening the Hill on whatever, November 25th, let's say, and we got really quite a cold snap and some snow already out in Alberta, so some of them have already opened or open next week. How are you gonna figure out the training schedule? So it's one thing if you send out to your new recruits your employee handbook and your policies and your health and safety guidelines, and you want them to read through it, make sure they understand it, and then sign them and send back to them. That's fine. But if you're asking them to commit their time to be at a certain point in time online for your training, you need to look at compensation, because that's now quite a time investment, and that should kind of, the training date should be your start date. If you have like 3 or 4 days of 2, 3 or 4 hours a day on virtual training, that's really their staff time, which you would normally have on the Hill. So you really want to kind of consider that if you're looking at what's the actual starting date for your staff members. So that's a kind of a few things I thought might be really interesting to either have further conversation or for you to just kind of keep in mind on that. Working in the, we've done a lot of work at GoToHR over the last 7 or 8 months around training. We've always done training, obviously, but we've moved a lot of online in classroom content into online. Like I run the Superhost program as an example, and we do instructor certifications on our programs, I would say maybe 3 times a year, which is normally a 2-day in class. We have 2 full days, 9 till 4, go through all the curriculums, work through all the activities and the content with lunch breaks and everything. And people can come from all over the province and some of them outside the province. So when we were looking at this, we said, okay, we need to obviously make a change. So what we did a blended learning piece, as I mentioned earlier. So we had, we set up a course on the learning management system. We gave the instructors the login, and then they had 2 weeks to go through the uploaded courses and training materials ahead on time. And then we did 2 half-day sessions on Zoom in a live conversation and go through the rest of the content. And that was a bit of a pilot, and I didn't know exactly at that time how it's going to work out. But it went really well. People liked the self-directed, self-paced piece, and only having to commit 2 half days to a live session. And we shared the same content. Everybody walked away with exactly the same learning than we would have in the 2-day classes. But it takes a lot more planning and kind of laying it out how you want to kind of make that happen, the structure around it, right? And I think when we talk about here today on what you want to do, what kind of training you want to keep face-to-face, and what kind of training you want to move onto digital. This is probably not just something you're looking at for this season. When we did this, I really look at long-term investments and timing. we're probably not going to move away from any of the COVID restrictions for the next spring, or if you're in summer operations, and maybe not even for the next season. So look at your planning on what would be a long-term investment, which really gives you the benefits of saving time and resources, saving administration time, and get a better output at the end in regards to tracking and reporting. So that's something to look at. You want something right for now, short term, or you want something where you say, hey, you know what, let's look at it a bit more longer out and really incorporate this into our training strategy long term. What we've done for this group here today, and I asked Dawn to share this with all the members at Canada West, and is really the putting a lot of stuff we talked about today together in a kind of a bit of a best practices guide, where I give more information around different platforms and the before training, during training, after training, engagement tips, and lots of other stuff. So we will share this after the call, and then you can have kind of a little bit more of a look through this at your own time and see what might be really of benefit for you, and kind of how you want to move forward. Another thing I like to offer, if there's an interest, and maybe Carissa, we can put a poll question out here for the group. Would you find it of benefit for your organization and for you to have me schedule a virtual kind of drop-in session over the next few weeks? Maybe do an hour a week where you we kind of publish a link and you can just sign in and do a one-on-one with me on specific questions you might have, or any assistance you would like, or anything which is a bit more organization specific, because everybody might be a little bit at a different point right now. If that's of an interest, I'm very happy to allocate some time for that. Okay, let's see where we're at here. Maybe we have a half and half here, and if you want to share the results here, Carissa, I think 57% would find this helpful. So why don't we set this up? I will look at my schedule over the next 4 weeks, and then Christopher, we could share this with all the members, and then they can either schedule it. I have to see how we logistically make that happen and make sure there is enough one-on-one time available, and then can just drop in and kind of do a bit more of a one-on-one specific for the organization. That might be a good thing.
I think sort of Andrea, understanding the concept there too, if there's like an appointed time where people are just able to call in, ask their questions, and then go, if that's just sort of explaining the format, we can do that with the communication out to members. So thank you for the offer.
Yeah, exactly. And I will have a look at what works best. My colleague Ginger, she's doing it with another program, and so really making the time available, people knowing when it's going to happen, and then whenever it works for them time-wise, they can call in. Or if it's more convenient, to contact me directly and schedule some time. But sometimes it's just nice to know, hey, there's a certain open door, kind of open house, and then people can just drop in if they have the time and this crazy busyness everybody's in right now, I'm sure, to get up and running with operations. So we're gonna set that up, and I will connect with Dawn and Christopher on that to make that happen. I've been talking for like 45 minutes non-stop. That is something you do not want to do when you do your training session with your staff and they're all young people and you want to get engagement and you want them to share and everything. Yeah, that would not necessarily something you want to consider. Works for today, but it's not something you want to kind of adapt for your own training session when you actually get people going, get them all excited about your culture and your workplace and getting out on the skis and get out on the hills. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I've got to share on content. I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but we only have an hour, so it's a little bit compressed on the content here. So but that's why I think the afterwards, the Q&A drop-ins might come in really handy if there's some more follow-up questions. But I think we do have, Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, we've got 15 minutes maybe to go over a few questions if there are any.
Yeah, we do have a few. I'll help you out because there were some at the beginning of the chat. So some of the members have been answering along while your presentation, but we did have one question, and hoping to give some insight on how to address challenges with people who are having hearing impairment, like with respect to online meetings and training. Are you aware of any sort of closed caption options with Zoom?
That's a really great question. I think Zoom does have that available. I haven't used it, but I think they do have the function. I am going to look into this a little bit more, and then Dawn send you an email on that with some more feedback.
Okay, great, and I can share it with everybody online.
And when you share links like to videos and stuff, we put a lot of stuff on YouTube, and yeah, there you can activate the closed captioning as well. And then we have a lot of our training courses on a learning management platform where you as well be able to do closed captioning for all the video content, and as well narrate the courses depending on what the courses are. But in the live session, I think there's a closed captioning, but I will check into that. Dawn, if you wouldn't mind making a note, so then we can talk about this after.
Certainly, certainly. The next question is from Christopher. What tips do you have on creating meaningful discussion, especially with challenging topics? I mean, this is not really a training, but a more effective group discussion.
So how to facilitate an engaging conversation? Is that the question?
Yeah, when you've got more than 5 people, but if you get into that 15, 20, how do you actually engage in some of the things you had, like the breakout rooms, the Jamboard, those kinds of things help. One of the things I haven't yet seen, though, is group discussions where you've got an issue and you're trying to work through it. Yeah,
that's a really good question, actually. When you have an issue, there are a couple of ways to do it. And again, there I kind of go back to group work. So I would introduce in the main session, we call it main session, and then breakout rooms. So in the main session, I would introduce the issue and the topic at hand to the whole group, and then give some very specific guidance on how you want to have this discussed. You can either open it up to the whole main room and just have people popping up, popcorn kind of style, and raise their hands and give feedback, which works. But again, you don't get everybody involved. Specifically, as you mentioned, if you have 20 people on a call, there I would pose the question, the issue, what you want them to talk about, kind of give instructions on how to lead the conversation, pop that into the chat as an instruction, and then break people off into breakout rooms. You get so much more out of these, specifically when they're issues and you want to talk about something but more delicate. You get a lot more conversation going and people sharing their experiences when they're in smaller groups. So here it's really helpful to do breakout rooms. I would do a maximum of 4 people, so everybody really gets engaged, and give it enough time. If you have an issue you want to talk about, moving them into a breakout room and give them 4 minutes or 5 minutes is not going to get you anywhere. You want to make sure there's enough time for them, for actually everybody within the group of 4 to speak and to, you know, to discuss the issue and come up with ideas and how that could be handled. And then one person in the group is going to be the note taker. And then when you have them coming back, like say after 10, 12 minutes into the main session, then each group is going to debrief their findings. And then you can take it from there rather than talking to every single person in the room, right? So breakout rooms are, I think, really the way to go on that.
There's been a lot of questions, just everyone is wanting some feedback on recommendations for online training apps. So I know some have been mentioned here on the chat that people are utilizing, but is there anything that you would want to recommend?
I would really look at, like say, 3 or 4, which are most popular. Zoom is one of them. GoToMeetings is another one. And look, but no, start a bit earlier. Look at what are your requirements. What content do you want to share? Comes back to what we talked earlier. What content do you want to share within your onboarding? And in order to share that, look at how you would deliver it in a classroom, and now kind of plan how you want to transition this online. What kind of tools do you need to make that an engaging session, and what functionality would you like to see? For me, any app which gives me the opportunity for a breakout room works for me. But then you want to look at, okay, how many users can you have on an app and what are the costs for that? There is a website, it's called TechSoup, like the soup, TechSoup, and they have lots of recommendations on apps. You can actually, we got our Zoom like 50% off for the year. I mean, great. That, and it just kind of popped in my head. That might be a source, but I would really look at what do you want on tools, and if you want to have it recorded or the apps do recording. Do you want to have attendee tracking because you don't have any other platforms to make that happen? Then go to meetings and go to webinars is great. It's more costly though. You know, do you want to share whiteboards and get people really active? Or you say, hey, you know, I really don't need all this bells and whistles. I'm fine with video recording and people be able to see me, of course, and the chat function, which most of them have, and I'm good to go. It's really what are your requirements for your session. And that might be, if you're not quite sure where you want to go with that, that might be a good reason for you to dial in and have a chat with me over the next few weeks, if you're not quite sure. And I don't know, Dawn, Christopher is giving the time sensitivity towards running towards opening quite quickly. I want to see that we give enough time for your members to actually be able to dial in. So I'm going to look at how many hours a week we can dedicate to this so that everybody has an opportunity to call in if they would like to. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but it really depends on what kind of training you're going to do. For me, I wouldn't do anything without a whiteboard and a breakout room. And obviously I want to have it recorded, but then I want to have, if I have like 100 or 150 or 200 people, I want at the same time want to be able to track this, who's attended, right? So it's a little bit of a toss sometimes.
Okay. We have one last question that's here, so maybe afterwards, if you wanted to ask anybody to speak about their experience with online training, we have a bit of time for that as well. So the last one is from Bob. How do you recommend reinforcing the online training content in subsequent face-to-face training sessions?
Can you repeat this, Dawn?
Certainly. How do you recommend reinforcing the online training content in subsequent face-to-face training sessions?
Okay, so setting up the online training session first and go through the material and then following up with face-to-face training sessions?
Correct.
Again, depends a bit on the content, but I like the piece on when you do something online and you really introduce people to a topic and you know, to how you do your operations on the hill and policies and everything, and do that on online. And then when they're going to be in face-to-face, like for example, customer service, right? What are your, and we have a webinar coming up on that one next week, but customer service, you can talk about the concepts, you can talk about your customer service culture, how you want to create an experience for your guests in the resort, and talk about all that. And then you could take this into a face-to-face conversation on, you know, simulating scenarios, what you might encounter now with this whole environment we're in regards to challenging situation with skiers. And that's something you probably want to have a face-to-face interaction with and practice, you know, scenarios and verbiage and get them ready for the real life once they start working. So, or you do something online and then you ask them to do some assignments outside of the online environment and then have that kind of played out and reinforced in a classroom. There needs to be some continuity on if you start something in the online environment on a content and on a topic, and how you're going to bridge this over into the face-to-face so that they can see the link between the two.
Okay. We actually don't have much time. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong, we're at 10:40, but I don't know if you wanted to open up and ask one person, or we can just end it there. You've provided such great information this morning.
Yeah,
well done. Thank you.
It's if anybody would like to share something they've seen and maybe 2 key tips of what they've done and lessons learned which worked really well for them, or it hasn't worked and now they learn from it moving forward. I mean, I'm happy to open up the floor here for a few minutes. And we had 2 people who've done this regularly and quite a few people who've done this now and again. So if anybody has some insights they want to share in addition to what we just talked about, that would be great.
No one wants to be on the spotlight.
No takers here. But that's okay.
It's Christopher.
Right?
I was going to say our best tip was asking Andrea for sharing her tips. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Here are my contact information. I'm happy to answer any further question on email. Give me a call, and then stay tuned on more to follow in regards to the our virtual drop-in, if that's of an interest. I'm going to arrange that with the team. And anything else, Dawn, Christopher, or Mike, you want to share before?
Yeah, Mike, do you want to say any final words before we sign off?
Andrea, thank you so much. Great presentation. Great job. And I liked all the interactivity we had on the chat there. That was fantastic. No further comments from me, but again, thank you to everybody for joining us today. And just a quick reminder, next Wednesday, November 4th, the third in our series, in combination with Canada West, focusing back on accommodations specifically in housekeeping and public spaces. So please pass the word along to your accommodation teams. And the sign up is either at Canada West's website or bcha.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. It's been fun working with you and Chris on these webinar series. And just a reminder, we actually have two sessions next Wednesday, November 4th at 9:45. Andrea is returning back to do an effective customer service during the pandemic session, and she's invited Teresa Ito from Blue Mountain Solutions as well as a guest speaker. So the sign up registration is on our event page. And no, this has been great. Appreciate it, Andrea, and thanks to Mike and Carissa for working with us. And thank you for everybody else for joining us this morning. I hope everyone has a great day and hopefully see you next week.
Great day, everybody, and a good start of the season. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.